In this video today, we're going to look at comparing and ordering decimals. Let's start by comparing two decimals. We know that when we're adding or subtracting decimals, we have to line up our places, and the same thing is when we're comparing and ordering decimals. So I'm going to take my two numbers that they've given me, 3 and 9/10, 3 and 9/100, and I'm going to line them up so that the decimal points are right on top of each other. There's 3 and 9/10 and 3 and 9/100. And whenever we're comparing two numbers, we start with our place that's all the way on the left. So for us, that's going to be our ones place right here. That's will be the place we look at. And when I look at that, I have a 3 and a 3. Well, I can't tell which number is bigger by looking at a 3 and a 3, so that tells me I have to move to the next place, which is my tenths place. And when I look in the tens place, I see I have a 9 and a 0. So I ask myself, what is bigger, a 9 or 0? Well, a 9 is bigger, so that tells me that 3 and 9/10 is a larger number than 3 and 9/100. So over here in my problem, I'm going to put 2 dots by the bigger number, 1 dot by the smaller number, and connect them. And this really makes sense when you think about it, because I know that this is 3 holes, and if I wanted 9/10, I would draw 9 rods. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And if I was drawing 3 and 9/100, I would have 3 holes and 9/100, which are smaller. So that shows me that 3 and 9/100 is smaller than 3 and 9/10. Now we're going to do the same thing with two more numbers. Here I have 45 and 67/100 and 45 and 6/10. So again, I'm going to line up my digits, 45, 67/100, and 45, and my decimal points are right on top of each other, 45 and 6/10. So just like before, we're going to start with our place value all the way on the left, and that's the tens place. And I'm in a 4 and a 4, and they're the same, so I can't really tell which number is bigger. I'm going to move to the ones place, and I've got a 5 and a 5. Again, I cannot tell which number is bigger, so I've got to move to the next place. So I go to my tenths place. I have a 6 and a 6, which is also equal, so I cannot tell from there which number is bigger. So I'm going to move on to the hundredths place, and when I look at the hundredths place, I see I have a 7 in the hundredths place, and I have nothing in the hundredths place. And it's hard to think of, but sometimes, but we know that we can put a 0. We can put a 0 in the hundredths place there, because we can add zeros to a decimal. And so I can compare my 7 and my 0, and I know that a 7 is larger than 0. So that tells me that 45 and 67/100 is larger than 45 and 60/100, or 6/10. So 2 dots by the bigger number, 1 dot by the smaller, and connect. Now we're going to use the same strategy to compare more than one number. We're going to put them in order. In this problem, it's telling us to put the numbers in order from greatest to least. And it's important that I remember which order I'm putting it into, because most problems are probably going to try to trick you by putting one in order from least to greatest and one in order from greatest to least. So we're going to start by lining up our digits, and I can see that they're already lined up over here. So I'm just going to use this just the way it is. In some problems, they are not going to be lined up like this, and you'll have to write them in order. Or they may just give you the models, the decimal squares, and you're going to have to write the decimal that goes with it, and then write them in order from there. So when I look at this problem, I can see that I have digits in the ones place, so I'm going to look first at my ones place, and I can see that all my numbers are a 3. And if all my digits are a 3, then I cannot tell which number is the biggest or the smallest from there. So I'm going to move on to my tenths place. And this is where it starts to get a little tricky when you have multiple numbers. And I can see I have a 1, 0, 4, and a 4. So I can tell from this that 0 is the smallest number, So that tells me that that is going to be my very smallest number because 0 is less than 1 and 0 is less than 4. That leaves me with a 1, a 4, and a 4. I know that my 1 is less than the 4's, so that is going to be my second smallest number. So I'm going backwards because it says greatest to least, so 3 and 4 are my least or smallest numbers. So now I cannot tell the difference between this 4 and this 4, so that tells me I have to move on to my hundredths place. And here I have a 4 and a blank space, which means I can put a 0 there. I have a 4 and a 0, so I ask myself which is smaller or bigger. 4 is bigger than 0, so that tells me that 3 and 44 hundredths is the very biggest number that I have, and 3 and 40 hundredths is next. So I would write my numbers in order from greatest to least by starting with a 3 and 44 hundredths, then 3 and 40 hundredths, 3 and 14 hundredths, and then 3 and 4 hundredths. You might also see it written out sideways with commas in between. And that is exactly the same thing. You just want to make sure that if it says greatest to least, that you have your biggest number first and your smallest number last. Okay, we're going to do one more problem. And in this problem, it's asking us to go least to greatest. So I'm looking for the smallest to the largest number. And if you notice that in these four numbers, the decimals are not lined up. So I have to line them up. So I'm going to take my numbers and rewrite them. The whole time my goal is to make sure that all my decimal points are right on top of each other. Now this may look a little funny because my digits now are not going to look like they're lined up, but they truly are because every digit that's to the left, right to the left of this decimal point is in the ones place, and then we have the tens place. So now I'm going to start by looking at my place value all the way to the left, and I can see I have 4 in 2 of my numbers. Well, that means that in these other 2 places I have zeros. So if I'm looking to go from least to greatest, that I know that this number and this number are going to be my 2 least numbers, my 2 smaller numbers, because they don't have anything in the tens places. And that these 2 are going to be my largest numbers because they have a 4 in the tens place, so they are larger. But I have to think deeper than that, and I have to know that if I'm going least to greatest, that I have to go look at the next place value. So I'm going to look at my my ones place, and I'm going to start by just looking at these, the 2 that had zeros in the tens place. I'm going to look at those because I want to see which number is truly the smallest. So here I have a 4 and a 4. Well, I can't tell from that place value, so I have to go to my tens place. And here I can see I have a 2 and a 3. So I ask myself which is smaller because I'm going least to greatest. And 2 is smaller than 3, so that shows me that this is my very smallest number. And then that tells me that 4 and 32 hundredths would be my second smallest number. So now I'm done with those 2 numbers. I've got to go back, and I'm just going to cross these out to show that I'm done so I can go back and look at these other 2. You wouldn't cross them out, but I want to make sure that you can see what I'm looking at. So at these 2 numbers, I looked in the tens place and I saw that I had a 4 and a 4 and they were exactly the same. So now I have to go to my ones place and I have a 2 and a 6. So I asked myself which is smaller because I'm going least to greatest. I have a 2, which is smaller than a 6. So I know that 42 and 1/10 is smaller than 46 and 87 hundredths. So I know that 46 and 87 hundredths is my greatest number. It's the last number. So I would rewrite these in order. 4 and 23 hundredths, 4 and 32 hundredths, 42 and 1/10, 46 and 87 hundredths. Now be careful because we don't want to make the mistake in thinking that the number of digits has anything to do with how big the number is. You always want to start on the left, the very furthest place to the left, and start comparing there, and then go from there and go to the right. Just to give you an example, I could have a number that was like this. Oops. 32 hundredths. And I can have a number that is like this. 4. Well, 4 is greater than 32 hundredths, but it has less digits because this is like $4 and that's like 32 cents. So you cannot look at the number of digits to compare your numbers. Always start on the left and move to the right.